Look at your hands. Are they empty? Right now, as you watch this, feel the space around you, the air, the light. Now, feel your pockets. Not with your hands, but with your memory. Your awareness. What are you carrying? Not keys, not phones. Something else. Something deposited into your care, sometimes with a whisper, sometimes with a tear, sometimes with the sheer force of someone's need to be heard. A story, a confession, a fracture in someone else's life. You received it. You accepted it. And in that acceptance, you made a promise, spoken or unspoken, to carry it. You became a keeper. We rarely talk about this. The quiet burden of carrying stories that are not our own to tell. It is one of the most universal yet most solitary human experiences. We are, each of us, living libraries for other people's unbound volumes. Sections of our inner selves are cordoned off, marked restricted access. This narrative belongs to another. And within those sections, it is never silent. There is a low, constant hum. The friction of a truth that cannot know the air. Think of the last heavy thing someone told you. The friend who revealed a trauma over coffee. The family member who entrusted you with a corrosive secret about the past. The colleague who cracked open under pressure and showed you their breaking point. You listened, you held their gaze. You said, "I'm here," and you were. But then they left, and the story stayed. It didn't stay as a neat, filed-away fact. It stayed as a weight. A stone, smooth from the handling of their anguish, cold from the shadows it lived in. You placed it in your pocket, and you felt its pull against your leg with every step since. This is the silent witness. This is you. This is me. We are the holders. Our empathy, our very capacity for connection, becomes the receptacle. And empathy, when it cannot complete its cycle, when it cannot move through action or advocacy or even open acknowledgement, becomes a heavy, unvoiced debt. You owe the story your silence, but your spirit pays a tax for its storage. Let's name this exhaustion. It is not the fatigue of your own life's drama. It is the phantom fatigue of a narrative on loan. You are tired from a journey you did not take, haunted by a ghost that is not yours. You think, why am I so drained? My life is fine. But you are not living just your life. You are hosting. And hosting requires energy, light, space, all of which are quietly siphoned to keep that story in its place. To prevent its accidental escape, we must examine this friction. It is the friction of potential energy. The energy of a story meant to be told, to be released into the world, to catalyze change or healing. But trapped, that energy doesn't vanish. It radiates inward, into the keeper. It manifests as a low-grade anxiety, a need to be careful, to curate conversations, to steer talk away from certain cliffs. It shows up as a peculiar form of loneliness, because you are holding a truth that creates a barrier between you and others. You can't fully explain your mood, your distraction, your sudden need for quiet. It is the erosion of peace by proxy. How do these stories find us? Why are we chosen? Sometimes it is love. They trust us with their broken pieces because they believe we will not cut ourselves on them. Sometimes it is circumstance. We were simply there when the dam broke. Sometimes it is our own propensity, our quiet aura that signals, I am a safe harbor. We become story catchers, and there is honor in that. Profound human honor. The world needs keepers. But the world rarely checks on the keeper's spine, bent under the accumulation. This documentary is that check-in. Let's move from metaphor to mechanism. What is this weight? We can break it down. The first layer is the weight of confidentiality. This is the pure, simple mass of the secret itself. The mental effort of compartmentalization. Creating a separate room in your mind, locking the door, and remembering to never, ever leave the key in sight. This cognitive load is real. Your brain is using resources to maintain that boundary every single day. The second layer is the weight of unprocessed emotion. When someone shares a trauma or a profound sadness with you, they are not just transferring information. They are transferring emotional energy. You feel their sorrow, their anger, their fear. But unlike them, you may not have the right to express it, to mourn it, to rage about it. You must absorb the emotional shockwave and then contain the reverberations. You swallow the echo. The third layer is perhaps the heaviest, the weight of immobilized action. You know a truth that, if acted upon, could change things. A wrong that could be righted, a danger that could be mitigated. But the story is not yours to act on. You are bound by loyalty, by ethics, by fear of causing greater harm. So you hold the knowledge of what could or should be done, alongside the paralysis of being forbidden to do it. This is the stone that burns. It is the weight of restrained justice, of muzzled advocacy. And then, there are the different types of stories we keep. Not all stones are the same. The sacred secret, given in love, a fragile truth. Holding it is an act of devotion. Its weight is the gentle, aching weight of preciousness. The toxic secret, deposited not in trust, but in manipulation or shared guilt. This stone is porous. It leaks shame and anxiety into your system. The fragmented story. You only have a piece. A glimpse of someone's pain without the context. Your mind tirelessly, helplessly tries to complete the puzzle, spinning narratives in the dark. The future anxiety story. A confidence about a looming disaster, a health scare, a financial cliff. You now carry the dread of an event you can only watch approach. We carry these for the people we love. We carry them for coworkers, for strangers on a long journey who see a kind face. We even carry them for history, the family stories of trauma passed down like heirlooms of sorrow, stories we inherit and must honor but can never fully understand. This keeping shapes us. It can make us wiser, more compassionate, more trusted. But unchecked, it can also make us weary, distant, and ironically, less able to connect authentically. When your inner world is crowded with the unspoken narratives of others, where is the space for your own story to breathe? Let's talk about the spirit. The quietly draining your spirit part. What does that mean? Spirit here is not necessarily religious. It is your vital force, your joy, your spark, your innate peace. It is the light you generate to navigate your own life. When you carry a story not your own, you must dim that light. Why? For two reasons. First, out of respect. Your joy can feel like a dissonant trumpet blast next to someone else's silent grief you hold. You subdue your own brightness in a form of solidarity. Second, for security. A bright, curious, expansive spirit might accidentally illuminate that restricted section. It might ask the wrong question, make the wrong joke, stumble into the secret garden. So you learn to keep your own light at a safe, lower wattage. You become a custodian of shadows that belong to someone else. This is the unvoiced debt. The interest paid on the loan of a story is your own vitality. So what do? Are we to refuse the stories? Build walls instead of libraries? No. The answer is not in rejection, but in conscious stewardship. The first step is acknowledgement. Simply say to yourself, with kindness, I am carrying a weight that is not mine. I feel it. Its presence is valid. This alone is a release of pressure. You are no longer ignoring a low-grade fever of the soul. The second step is discernment. Examine the stones in your pocket. One by one, in the quiet of your own mind. Ask, whose story is this? What was my promise? Is this a weight I agreed to carry, or was it placed upon me without consent? Is this secret still sacred, or has it become toxic? Some stones upon examination you may realize you have permission to put down. The person may have moved on, the situation resolved, but you were never told the keeping was over. You can gently lay that stone down. The third step is the ritual of internal release. For the stories you must continue to hold for the love, the ethics, the true necessity. You need a way to metabolize the emotional weight without breaking the confidence. This is internal work. Write the story in a letter you will never send. Speak it aloud to the trees, to the steering wheel on a long drive, to a closed room giving the words sound but not an audience. In your mind, visualize placing the story into a strong, beautiful box on a high shelf within you. You acknowledge it is there, you honor it, but you are not constantly holding it in your hands. You are changing your relationship with the weight from carrying to safeguarding. The fourth step is replenishing the keeper. You must deliberately, actively counter the drain. This means consciously stoking your own spirit. Engage in activities that are purely, joyfully yours. Not for anyone's benefit, not to process anything. To create your own light. Walk. Dance to a silly song. Build a model. Garden. Watch a comedy. Reclaim the wattage. This is not selfish. It is essential maintenance for the library you operate. A dark, depleted keeper is no good to anyone. And finally, the ethical boundary. This is the hardest one. There are times when a story ceases to be just a personal secret and becomes a matter of someone's safety or profound well-being. The stone becomes a red-hot coal. The weight of immobilized action becomes unbearable and unethical. In these rare, critical instances, being a keeper may transform into being a whistleblower, a protector in a more active sense. This requires immense courage and often professional guidance. But it is part of the keeper's continuum, the understanding that our primary loyalty is to life and safety, even above a promised silence. This is the balance. Compassion against the erosion of your peace. It is not a balance you find once and keep. It is a daily, subtle adjustment. Like a tree adjusting to the weight of a bird's nest. The nest is there, it belongs to another, it is a privilege to host it. But the tree must also grow its own branches towards the sun, sink its own roots for water. It must sustain its own life to sustain the other. Look at your hands again. They are not meant to be forever full. They are meant to receive, to hold, to examine, and then to let go, or to place gently down, or to keep with conscious choice. The quiet burden is real, but it can be a mindful burden. A chosen responsibility, not a passive affliction. You are a story catcher, a witness, a keeper. This makes you human, connective, essential. But remember, the best keepers are those who also tend to the garden of their own narrative, who air out their own rooms, who sometimes walk with empty pockets, feeling the sun on their thighs, the wind against the fabric, light and unencumbered. It is from that place of light and being that you can truly be strong enough to hold space for another's darkness when it is needed. Your peace is not the enemy of your compassion. It is its foundation. So today ask yourself, what am I carrying? Whose story is it? Does it still need to be here? And what can I do to honor both the keeper and the kept? The goal is not a life without weight. The goal is to ensure the weight you carry is yours to bear, or yours to bear by loving, conscious choice. To turn the silent friction into a hum of purposeful care, and to replace the quiet draining with a quiet, resilient flow. In our pockets, we carried stones, single weights. But we do not live in pockets. We live in landscapes. And in these shared spaces, our families, our circles, our culture, the stones we carry individually are often just fragments. Broken pieces of something larger. A monument we walk around every day. So familiar we've stopped seeing its shape. This is the geography of silence. Not the quiet burden of a single story, but the monumental weight of stories that have become the bedrock of a family, the forgotten cornerstone of a community's identity. These are the narratives that are not any one person's to tell, because they have, through silence, become everyone's to unknowingly carry. The personal secret is a stone. The family secret is a foundation. The cultural secret is the very ground we stand on, often unaware of its fault lines. We move from the friction in our pockets to the architecture of our collective unconscious. When a story is deemed unspeakable within a family system, it doesn't vanish. It undergoes a strange alchemy. It transforms from an event into an atmosphere. It becomes the unasked question at Thanksgiving, the unexplained flinch in a grandparent's eye, the don't go into the attic, that is never said but universally understood. Children are born into this atmosphere. They breathe it in. They inherit not the story, but the silence around the story. And that silence is a shape. It molds them. They become keepers of a narrative whose title they have never read. They carry the weight of the question mark itself. The family archivist, Sarah, who inherited the boxes of photos and letters. She is the designated unofficial curator of a history full of gaps. I know there was a falling out in '62, she says, sorting photos. I see the cut people out of pictures. I feel the cold spot in the family story where warmth should be. My job is to keep the album intact, even with the missing pieces. The community elder, Mr. Alvarez, who remembers the factory fire the town rebuilt over, literally and figuratively. We don't talk about the ones who weren't saved, we talk about the resilience. But the resilience is built on a grave. The young ones feel the sadness of this place but don't know its name. I know the name. I carry the list. The generational bridge. Leo, who uncovers a hidden ancestry through a DNA test, a truth his grandparents took to their graves. I am now holding a truth that rewrites my family's story, a truth that would have devastated my elders. Do I speak it? It's my history, but was it their trauma to conceal? I'm holding a key to a door that no longer exists. This is the phenomenon of inherited silence. It is the quiet burden compounded by generations. We think of trauma as being passed down through stories. But more insidiously, it is passed down through the absence of stories. The body keeps the score, yes. But the family keeps the silence, and that silence is a language all its own. Children learn its grammar. Don't ask, don't upset, don't look there. The stone is no longer in a pocket. It has been buried in the family field. And everyone is tasked with not noticing the mound, while simultaneously being forbidden from digging. What is the cost of tending this buried stone? It costs authentic connection. How can we be fully known if entire chapters of our origin are redacted? It costs emotional intuition. We may inherit the anxiety, the depression, the hypervigilance that belong to a story we never heard. We are haunted by a ghost whose name we cannot say. And on a larger scale, communities and cultures build monuments of silence around historical trauma, injustice, or shame. The unspoken agreement to move on often just means moving the weight into a communal closet. It sits there, affecting the social soil, poisoning the water table of trust and mutual understanding. The story becomes a silent sculptor of policy, of prejudice, of unhealed division. So we arrive at a more profound and difficult question. When does a story that was not yours to tell become yours to release? When does the duty of keeping morph into the duty of healing? This is the journey from keeper to releaser. It is not a betrayal. It is, in some cases, the highest form of loyalty to the truth, to healing, to ending the cycle of silent suffering. My mother carried the secret of her childhood abuse for 60 years. She told me when I was a teenager, made me swear never to tell the family. I carried that stone for her. It shaped my entire relationship with my grandparents, with my aunts and uncles, a relationship built on a lie I was upholding. When she passed, the stone turned to lead. I realized I wasn't carrying it for her anymore. I was carrying it instead of her. And it was keeping her trauma and my own anger frozen in time. I had to choose. Continue the silence, which felt like perpetuating the abuse, or speak my truth that I was grieving a mother who was haunted and that our family story had a wound that needed air to heal. Maya's dilemma is the keeper's crucible. The ethics shift when the original bearer of the story is gone, or when the silence itself is causing active harm. The release of a story is not an act of gossip. It is an act of archaeology. It is the careful, respectful unearthing of a truth, not to shame, but to reassemble the broken pieces of a family or community vase so it can finally hold water again. The process is delicate. It requires intention, often therapy, and immense courage. It might look like contextualizing, not blaming. I'm sharing this not to accuse, but to explain the shadows I grew up with. Seeking shared release. Gathering other keepers of the same silent siblings, cousins, and unlocking the burden together. Changing the narrative from secret to history. Moving a story from the hidden ledger of shame into the shared archive of family experience, where it can be understood, integrated, and its power to haunt dissolved. But what of the stories we absorb not from a loved one, but from the world? The 24/7 news cycle, the global tragedies, the distant suffering streamed into our hands? This is a new, vast, and diffuse form of keeping. We are made involuntary witnesses to 1,000 stories of pain and injustice daily. We hold stones from conflicts we cannot resolve, from disasters we cannot help, from systemic evils we feel powerless to fight. This is ambient burden. The stones are not given. They rain down upon us. Our pockets are full to bursting with the gravel of the world's sorrow. The quiet burden becomes a cacophonous, overwhelming weight. The empathy debt is astronomical. Here, the keeper's discipline becomes survival. We must learn to be compassionate witnesses, not sponges. We must build a psychic filter not to become cold, but to become sustainable. This means consciously choosing where to direct our deep keeping energy and where to offer a compassionate prayer before letting the story pass through. We cannot personally inter every stone the world creates. We must build a memorial garden, not a graveyard. So, where does this leave us? We have moved from the intimacy of the pocket, through the shared landscape of the monument, to the global storm of stories. The conclusion is not a simple instruction to let go. It is an invitation to conscious inheritance. To audit the stories we hold. To ask, is this silence still serving love, or is it now serving fear? Is this weight mine to carry forever, or did I just inherit the job of carrying it? Does this story need to be buried, or does it need to be sung as a lament that finally releases its hold? What is the one stone I can actually turn over, and which ones must I acknowledge as part of a landscape I did not build, but must navigate wisely? The goal is not a world without monuments of silence. History and humanity ensure they will exist. The goal is to stop adding to them blindly. To bring the light of loving awareness to the ones we live among. To transform them from oppressive, hidden monoliths into acknowledged, integrated landmarks on our shared map. A stone you can see, you can walk around. A stone you can even lay flowers beside. It is the hidden stone that trips you every time. We are all keepers. We are all releasers. We are the children of silence and the authors of the next chapter. Carry what you must, with love. Release what you can, with courage. And for the stories that are truly not yours to tell, but are yours to witness, learn to hold them in your gaze without letting them consume your light. Build not pockets full of stones, nor monuments of silence, but gardens where even the heaviest truths can, over time, be composted into wisdom. The silence does not have to be a burden. It can be the sacred space between one breath and the next. The pause before a new, more honest story begins. Tell the stories that are yours to tell. And for the rest, let your healed, unburdened presence be the only testament required.